Just give you a heads up for next week. We've got Eric Cook available to talk about his career in IT, a little bit about his background, and also talk a little bit by what he sees exciting about what OpsRamp can do for an organisation. What I'd like to do today is tell you a little bit of why we think OpsRamp and AI Ops are a key factor for any organisation to use going forward. And it really is a bit of a history piece because I want to tell you a little bit about my past and also talk about what we've done over the last couple of years with Ashton University and the Advanced Services Group. So first of all, my background is I'm an ex-flight simulator engineer from the Royal Air Force. So I spent about 17 years maintaining flight simulator systems from analog to start with. I worked on an analog simulator using servos and actuators and differentiator amplifiers to do mathematical calculation for a flight program and flight envelope for a lightning simulator. Later on, I worked in computing using digital systems for flight simulation with the Hercules and the ground stack Tornado. So a lot of work around traditional computing platforms back in the 1980s were, very expensive components that were shared across multiple systems. We were looking at 10 and 300 meg drives that were multi-platter and cost thousands of pounds rather than the very large amount of storage you can have in just a phone or a watch these days. But quite different systems. But a lot of things were really difficult to identify where a fault was and then to identify how to fix that fault. And that's not really changed as we've moved forward through technology. I worked for organisations like IBM and Sun Microsystems, where we saw a move from mainframe to mid-range to microcomputing, and then we've seen a change from that physical server infrastructure into virtualization with technologies like OpenStack, VMware, Hyper-V, and then eventually into from the world of virtual machines into now containers, and we've seen a lot more of that happening. And through my experience, I've seen a lot of things around how we could actually monitor and manage that infrastructure, and learned quite a lot about how effective we can be with our infrastructure going forward. And in the past, we had the luxury of lots of people, and we also had very specialized skills in certain areas, that could focus on that. In simulation, we had people that specialized in avionics and radar and flight control systems within a simulator group and worked together as a team to diagnose and respond to issues. If you look at how IT worked some years ago, we would have specialisms in networking, storage systems, compute platforms, Linux, Windows, and those particular areas. Well, that's changed quite a lot. And I'll come into that a little bit more when we discuss what we've done with Aston University. So I went through a program called the Goldman Sachs Small Business 10,000 program, and it was something that Goldman Sachs set up after the financial crisis in 2008, to try and show how they could help organisations, especially small businesses, to improve the way that they were operated and help them grow rapidly by introducing, some of the large enterprise factors that you do around business management into those small business organisations. On completing that, you join an alumni, which is tied into a number of universities, Aston University, Oxford University, and also Leeds University, and you get to speak to a lot of people. One of the events I went to, I met a gentleman that had gone through the Goldman Sachs program, but then moved into working with Aston University's Advanced Services Group, looking at how you can actually move away from delivering basic services around a product and moving towards delivering capability. So I got involved with a program just over 2 years ago, and what we've done with that program is understand a bit more about what we can achieve and where we're going, but also spend time working with our customers to understand what they're trying to achieve. Because I think that's quite critical that you know what your customers want when you're actually taking this type of journey. So we had some quite interesting conversations with a number of our customers, looking at exactly what they were trying to do. And it was quite clear that we were having very similar thoughts to the customers around skill levels. And a lot of organizations we were talking to were really struggling with the amount of resource they had, but also the skills and experience within those resources. So their IT teams was very small still, and also they didn't have those specialisms. So they're all mainly generalist technology people, which meant when they had an issue, it took them quite a long time, one, to identify there was an issue, where that issue was, and how to resolve that issue. And commonly, there were anything between 2 and 4 hours to fix a problem, which in today's digital transformation world, we can't have. We need to be able to ensure that our services are operational 100% of the time, even if we have some level of degradation during that time, that we need to still be able to operate the business without loss of service. So, looking at that, some of the common things that we saw around the way that they were operating their infrastructure is from a people perspective, they would be buying in skills and experience when they needed it. So, getting contractors in for short periods of time, project related to actually implement and operate it initially, and do a little bit of transference of skills across in that time. But a lot of that skill and experience left as the contractor left. It made it a challenge for them to continue afterwards. So they're also using a multitude of tools to be able to monitor and manage their infrastructure. You know, some of those came commonly with the infrastructure that they purchased. If they went down the route of VMware, they were using VMware's vCenter tools to be able to understand a little about what was happening there. But they were then bolting other capabilities in, like SolarWinds and a variety of other technologies to look at the network infrastructure, the physical assets that were connected to that network, and using sometimes other third-party tools to monitor applications and also cloud-based services. So a lot of different tools, non-integrated, and it made it really challenging for them to be able to understand what was happening in their infrastructure. What happened with that as well is they were getting some massive amounts of alerts, so different alerts talking about issues they were having with their infrastructure. And because there were so many, it was difficult to see the ones that mattered and actually working with those to actually isolate an issue and resolve it quickly. It was more that they saw that something was happening, they couldn't really see it in focus until somebody phoned in and said, "We can't get to our ERP system, the HR system's not functioning," and that by that point in time the system is down and they utilize it. So very big changes are going ahead at the moment as well in infrastructure, where people are trying to use hybrid environments. So they're using some public cloud and there's some on-premise infrastructure to be able to deliver their services, because some of it really works for public cloud and some of it is better on-premise, especially things that need to be highly secured and also deliver high performance. It's sometimes better on an on-premise environment, whether that's a virtual or a container-based workload system in that environment. But then how do we look after all of it? So, with our work with the customers, we identified quite quickly one of the key things was AI ops. So using artificial intelligence so you can stream lots of information at it. And unlike humans, it can take more information, learn quickly from it through its business learning, correlate that information, and then make some decisions and give insight into what's happening. And the key difference between data and insight is context, isn't it? It's the context that information provides. So if you've got lots of alerts, if you understand the chain of relationships between the components, you can correlate where the actual root causes of that issue. If you can then also look at the information that's been presented from that root cause, you can quite quickly identify what needs to be done to fix it and provide insight to the staff. So you could, in one way, if you've not seen this issue before, but it's something that could be quite easily dealt with, and you can provide, say, a knowledge base entry, talks about that particular issue and context of it. You could then alert someone that's the most appropriate person by their skills and point them to where the problem is and also how to fix it. And that's a quicker way to resolve a situation. The other thing comes into automation. So a big part of AI ops is automation. So if you commonly have issues with a particular application, and the main way to do this is to say restart the process. Why not try that first and automate that? So create a run book with some scripts that run, or use some integration with an automation tool like Ansible, or if you're actually building new infrastructure out using something like Terraform, to actually automate some of that process. And I think that's where AIOps is really leading us, to be able to automate a large amount of what needs to be done, repetitive task, and focus on the things where we need people's experience and skills and analysis, with the other areas, and make sure we're notifying the right people. And I think that's where OpsRamp takes us. It's allowing us to give a customer a good understanding of their infrastructure and how it fits together, understand the entity relationships in there between the hosts and the software and network and the infrastructure, so we can actually do that root cause analysis much better, but also to bring insight into it, to show people that this issue relates to this component, and from the messaging, this is how you should be able to fix it. Yeah, as well as moving to that automation component as well. And that's how we've come to where we are with our work with OpsRamp over the last 3 to 6 months, looking at how we can actually help organizations to understand their infrastructure better, identify key issues quickly, and try and resolve them as quickly as possible. And the key aim we're driving towards is to predict a failure before it happens, prevent that failure, and prevail with the service delivery that we're offering. And I think if you see what's happened with some of the retailers during the COVID-19 early days issues, that they could not cope with the demand on their websites for click and collect or other types of delivery services, these kind of things are really important. And some of the things we can do with OpsRamp, which I think are quite interesting, is generating synthetic transactions for web-based services. So you can actually follow the process that an end user would do to go through the process of selecting and purchasing goods, and making sure that whole process works correctly, and there's no issues in there. And also looking at things like latency, because if it's slow, people give up, and go somewhere else to buy. If you're giving bad service, you're going to lose your customers. And some of the key things you can do around this automation of synthetic transaction and testing, I think, is critical for a lot of businesses. Finally, I think one of the other areas that we've already talked about in a couple of discussions with the guys from OpsRamp is that linking between business and technology. I've worked in both areas because I've been a technologist and worked in software development and hardware maintenance, so I understand it on that side. And I've worked very closely with business in the commercial sector in IT for the last 20 years or so. So I can understand it from both situations. But there is a gap normally within most organisations between technology and business. And what I think OpsRamp delivers that's quite unique is the ability to map those business services to the infrastructure components that deliver it, so that you can understand how effective you are in delivering that business service. Whether that's an e-commerce platform, HR platform, some kind of internal ERP or manufacturing process, but you can actually see if it's delivering the service it needs. But also what you can do is actually identify any degradation in that service, and also see what you've done to respond to that. I think those are critical things as we move forward, especially with business that are trying to go through this digital transformation here, and make all our business systems effectively web or some kind of software related communication between all parties in. So that's my take on it, and what we think OpsRamp, why OpsRamp's important to us. It's difficult really when we start talking to people, because it's trying to ensure that they understand why we're doing this. And I think telling this story about where we've been from a historic perspective with our infrastructure and services, the journey we've taken with Aston University, and also what we've seen out there with customers, and the issues and requirements they've got, we can see how it all fits together. So thank you very much for joining me today. Another OpsRamp Wednesday. Next week we've got Eric Cook talking about his background, how he got to where he is within OpsRamp, and some of the key things he believes that OpsRamp brings, from his perspective. So hopefully that's been of use, and hopefully see you next week. Also, tomorrow is Tactile Technology Thursday, so we'll talk a bit more about what tactile technology doing and how we see the value with some of the initiatives we're taking with the infrastructure and vendors that we. Thank you very much.